Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Design Recharge. I'm your host, Diane Gibbs, and I'm super excited to have my friend Matt Vergotis, and that I've checked with him. That's how he says his name, not goat, but got. And so I'm real excited to have you back. So we're actually continuing our conversation from last week. We're going to try not to repeat, but it might be new for some of you guys anyway. So we're just going to jump in. So Matt, I thank you so much for being back on the show today.
Thank you, Diane. And it's probably inevitable that I will start to go over stuff that we did last week. I can never remember what I did yesterday, let alone last week. So if I do, just butt straight in and say, Matt, we've covered that, mate.
Okay. Well, I actually think people won't care. And I'm actually, we already talked about this, so I'm good. So,
cool.
All right. So one of the things we talked, I just kind of want to recap some of the things that are really impressive to me of you is one, you do it, you just work for yourself. You do have a home office, but then you also have an office that you go to every day. And you, about 80% of your work, your clients comes from somewhere else besides Australia, but you actually also really, I think it seems like you really enjoy doing stuff for local people too. It's not like you're like, oh no, I don't do anything local. Like you really enjoy working for clients, and you do branding, corporate identity. You have a lot of different styles. Your range is really big. And you have these, which we're going to see some. And one of the things that we totally didn't get to last week, which is one of the reasons I wanted to have you back on so quick, was kind of your, the story of how you got into lettering. And I know, so some of the people that are here, if you come in, please tell us where you're from. I'm going to make sure that I keep, if you have questions, just feel free to answer them or put them in the chat, not answer them. I'll get Matt to answer them. But so Austin's here, Carol Ann, my mom, hey mom, my friend Kent, Kim, and Will. And so I know Kim is a lettering artist as well. She does a lot of stuff with chalk. So I want, I think it is kind of interesting and neat to hear how you kind of got into that. Because when you and I talked in the very beginning, a long time ago, you actually had moved from Australia to London, which could be a whole conversation in itself, right? Just packing up and moving.
Yeah.
But do you want to kind of give us your entry into?
Why don't I'll kick off, I guess, the presentation, because if I explain it now, then go to the presentation, I'll be sort of going over it again, because this presentation kind of is geared towards how lettering came into my life, specializing in corporate identity and all of that. But quickly to touch base on what you said before about local jobs, I've got a stack of local jobs that I've been working on. One that's going to drop soon, which I can't wait to show everyone. It's for a local sports team, which should drop at the end of this month. It's been done for a while now, but we've just been waiting for the right moment to push a video out. So I'm super excited about that one. And it was designing the mascot, the animal that's going to go on the football jerseys and all of that. So I can't wait to share that one. So yeah.
That's awesome.
Super fun. Yeah. Animals are well, actually, there's a couple in this presentation, so we can talk about that when we go along. But yeah, that's a real design challenge. Doing more iconic, animals.
Yeah, you slay it. You do great, and really, you do have a really big range. You've been in the industry for. Me and you are very similar, I think, maybe in age, and we've been in the industry about the same time. Yeah. So, how 20 years? Do you think that's, or do you?
Yes, so yeah. So I got into the industry straight after school. I was lucky, I did some work experience for a number of months, which gave me some foundation skills on the computer. Well, this is when the very first versions of Photoshop and Quark Express. That was the application. I loved Quark Express. That was
me too.
Yeah, it took me a while to sort of go, okay, what's this InDesign thing,
Yeah.
But then it made sense because I also loved Illustrator and I could see the sort of similarities. So it was an easy crossover. And yeah, but it's amazing to think that because Quark had such a stronghold over,
they did
publishing and all of that. But so I did work experience for a little bit, and then I had a junior role very early on. So I didn't go to college. University, and I had planned on doing that, but just for one reason or another, I kept landing these graphic design small roles that turned into, junior roles, senior roles, then studio manager and stuff like that. And along the way. So.
And you moved and you just take challenges. I think that's the other thing, but I also feel like sometimes people, or some people in our industry, luckily not any of my friends, but I think some people tend to kind of get a big head and then they won't maybe do local things or small things. But I actually feel like I know Von Glitchka does also. He's very similar to you, and that he really likes doing the smaller jobs too, because sometimes they give you maybe a little bit more freedom, or they trust you a little bit more because you do have the experience.
Well, I think for me is I love the variety of different clients. So, I mean, sure, there are certain ones that are, have more appeal to you to do, like if it's a, clothing brand or a craft beer or something like that. But then, you'll get an accounting firm or I've done so many logos for dentists. It's not funny. They all have unique requirements. And so, it means you've got a new brief to sort of interpret, and I don't know, it just keeps you challenged all the time. And especially if you do something and you've got a few styles that you've already done and you can't repeat those styles, so it forces you to I'm going to turn my emails off because I don't know if you could hear that.
I couldn't hear it.
It forces you to get out of your comfort zone and try new things. And I guess that's why there's a variety of styles if you look through the back catalog, because
but it's also,
you have to.
You're meeting the needs of different people, and also you stay in touch with the industry. This is how, if you have just one style, it can go out of favor quickly.
Sure.
I mean, it may last for 10 years, but then if you're not staying up with the times. So I think it's really interesting to interview people. I love interviewing people that are just budding and then they've just found something and they are going at it full force. But I also really like the seasoned pros, that you still have so much. My mom said this last week. She's like, man, he looks like a kid. And I'm like, I know, Mom, I think he's about my age though. And she's 43. Like, but I think really it's about, how old did you say?
What was that? 43. I'm 43. I was born in 74.
So I'm 73. I thought that's what I thought. And then I was like, he said 33. You've been 10 years off this whole time, Diane. I'm 44. Anyway, so I sorry about that, people. But anyway, but I think that you have an energy that is contagious and it is young. And I feel like then you want to stay up. I mean, just the stuff you do with your kids. I mean, like you are a kid inside. And I feel like that's what helps you to have been successful for 20 years.
Yeah. Well, I guess, how a lot of people say they still feel the same age, like, as they're getting on, I still feel like I'm 20 or, in my 20s or whatever. I mean, responsibilities come along and obviously, you have to have a mature head around certain things and stuff like that. But sort of the energy, and I call it the froth, has always, is always still there. And I don't want it to go away because that's sort of, it's fun to get excited about things. And, when you got kids, there's so many fun things to do with them. And,
yeah,
I don't know. Yeah, no, I guess it's just the froth factor is high.
Yeah, I think so too. Anyway, but I love that. But I also think that you are able, because you like the variety, you're able to get on board with those different companies and you're able to feel like you're part of their team. And I think that is also a critical part of having a long client, relationships for a longer period of time.
Yeah. There's a number of clients that I like. I mean, we talked a lot about black hops last week. That's just one that immediately comes to mind. I mean, I like to still have those, relationships intact and when I have those Skype chats, you get to meet people and you establish relationships, stuff like that. And I check in with a lot of clients throughout the year. Sometimes I'm slack with certain clients, but then all of a sudden one day I'll think about, what about that client? You might just touch base and see how things are going. And I think it's good just to keep those relationships strong.
I totally think so too. And I'm really bad at that. So that's going to be one of my New Year's resolutions for next year. except I'm going to try to start earlier than next year. But
yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, but I think that's great. Maybe that is another one of your superpowers, that you're able to keep in touch from all, because I think it is. It's hard. You get busy, you know what I mean? And then you're like,
Yeah.
oh man, what about Jody or whatever?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I can't say I do it with every single client, but you know, if there's a client that's listening that I haven't touched base with, they'll be like, what about me? What's wrong with me? So it's not all of them.
but I think anyway, I feel like a marketing idea is to have a plan and maybe touch base with some of those. And just for me, I just went over this, 5-year period of what I had done, work I had done. And I'm like, man, I haven't reached out to these clients, some of these clients since I did the job. And you don't know if you're leaving money on the table, because they may need something, but they just didn't know I did this, you know?
Yeah, definitely. 100%. You touch base with some clients and they, thanks for getting in touch. Oh, by the way, we've got something coming up that we'll have to get in touch and, talk business again. So there are other opportunities that it can lead to, for sure.
For sure. Well, do you read any business books? Like, do you keep, like, it seems you're like, no, I surf. That's what I do, Diane.
Yeah. I'm pretty bad with reading. I used to read a lot, and then I kind of stopped a number of years ago, and my family gives me a bit of cheek for it. Because my girls are right into reading at the moment, and my wife just she eats books. But I stopped. I don't know. I got to a stage where, I don't know, everything was sort of work, surfing, family. And then whenever I would try and read, I'd just fall asleep as soon as I slow down, so I stopped reading, but I want to get back into it.
Well, so what do you do to stay up business-wise? Because I think that's another thing that you're really good at. Or is it just natural? You kind of like, hey, I'm just going to kind of flow into this? Or is like the Slack channel you're a part of, is that people pulling things in and bringing ideas?
I think that's that can definitely help. But I've only been part of that Slack for, I think it's about a year now. I don't know. I guess just life. You pick up things along the way. When I worked for this recruitment agency, which started off only a very small company, I was very close with the directors, and I watched this company become, a rather large, international company. There was like 17 offices globally or something around that number. And I guess I picked up a lot of things. I was living with, a lot of my friends are, business people and stuff like that. So maybe subconsciously I pick up on things like that. I don't know. I guess so. I think you just got to keep busy, and you just got to, I don't know.
Keep your what?
Just keep busy and
busy. I thought you said keep your Z. And I'm like, ooh, is that another Australian term? Keep your Z, like people.
Keep your Z.
Well, so did you, I usually ask this to letters, did you just have beautiful handwriting as a kid? Like, is this, or did you just fall in love with letters? Because if you don't necessarily study it, when did you start really studying typography? Because to be able to make a font, Matt, that takes some serious knowledge.
Okay, so if you were to look at my handwriting taking notes, it's atrocious. It's really bad. I write in capitals, but I do remember I've got very vivid memories when I was really, really young, when they were teaching me how to do cursive writing. I remember there was a period, I hadn't thought about it for a long time, and it was only recent I thought, I remember I used to, do my descenders and do funny little loops and get a little bit creative with it through a little period when I was probably in it must have been like grade 3. So when you're in grade 3, I think you're about 9 or so over here. And I remember it clearly. I remember thinking, I really like this. And I was sort of, there was one way of doing cursive writing, but I remember like breaking free from it and just seeing where I could go with some of those things. I remember that. But then all of a sudden, as I got older, I started writing in capital letters, and I put cursive writing aside because I think it was too artistry for me, the cursive writing, for it to be quick and functional, because the reason why cursive writing is because it's a quicker way of writing. But I was embellishing in, indulging in all these sort of, shapes with ascenders and descenders and, you know, connecting strokes and stuff like that. I do remember that, but then, and this is why it's a distant memory, is because I stopped doing that. And then I was right into drafting. I did tech studies and graphics at school, where, you know, you write in capital letters, you know, when you're drawing up plans, architectural plans and stuff like that. And from there, I just kept writing in capital letters. And so that's my natural handwriting, is to write in uppercase.
So then when did you kind of go back? Like when it hit big, or what was it with a certain client that wanted something? And I maybe think I'm kind of prefacing what's in the presentation. So if you want to start it whenever.
Yeah. Why don't we just go straight into it? So
sounds good.
I'll
share I'm pretty sure you'll answer that question, right?
Yeah, it does. It really does. So here we go. Let me know when you can see my screen.
I can see your screen. It's not as big as it was before. Yeah, now it's big. Okay, excellent. We're ready.
Alrighty, so I can't see you, so you just jump in with any questions when you want. So, yep, that's me. Hello. Okay, so this presentation I did for a talk that I had to do, where I had to showcase some of my work in my life and stuff like that. So, I mean, as you know, I've got a young family, 2 daughters, a beautiful wife and all that, and I'm a self-obsessed surf nerd. That sort of gives you an indication of the time when I'm normally paddling out in the ocean, but it's actually a little bit late because you can see the sun. Normally the sun hasn't even poked its head on the horizon. You know, the sky is starting to lighten up a little bit, but yeah, so... Okay, if we could just do a little, this sort of explains, you know, since I went out on my own. I don't know if people can read that, but I'll quickly go through. I started Verg way back in 2007, which was right before the GFC. And as you can see, my logo
Global
back then,
financial crisis. Last week, people are like, what's GFC? Okay, so I just wanted to make sure everybody knows.
Yeah, I've had it. Yeah, we've abbreviated it. I've said that a few times to American people, and they've said that. So yeah, global financial crisis right before that hit. And so yeah, I had baby number 2 on the way. Had a really ugly, immature logo. That's me. You know, with the Verg with the. So as you can see, I'd always just like designed typefaces and, you know, from scratch and stuff like that. As you can tell by that funky looking Verg. Advertising was tacked on to the end of the name of my business because I had to put something on the end of it. And at that point in time, I was doing a lot of conceptual advertising. So yeah, that was that. Anyway, and then I started publishing my work around, see where the Transformer style logo is. I started publishing my work around that. And that's when that started to get a bit of traction. And we talked about that last week, just by over presenting and publishing on Behance and on Dribble, etc. That's when I started to get a bit of global recognition, and clients from all around the world started to notice my work and get in contact with me. And I'll just sort of skim through this part because I repeat it a little bit later on. But it was around 2014 that I started doing the lettering stuff. So here's just a collection of logos I did the other day. But that's probably about a year or 2 of logos. You can't really see them.
Wow, Matt, that's a ton.
Yeah, I know. It's a stack, but yeah.
Are most of those custom, or are you, I mean, as I'm looking, I see some that look custom and then some that look like maybe not custom, like the one that says Australian something, maybe not.
Yeah, there's probably, most of them would be.
Wow.
There's a few there that aren't like, oh geez.
I really can't find, except that Australian one is the only one that I can think that maybe you didn't. Maybe you did. Do you know which one? It's like the right next to Boss.
Oh, yeah. That's right. You're right. That one isn't that. But I probably modified the typeface a little. I don't know.
I bet. But most of the rest are you've completely.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So okay. So one week I might be doing minimalistic style logos, and this is an example of just very simple typefaces that I designed for clients that are from the ground up. I went through a stage where I was modifying other people's fonts to give them sort of a unique, you know, outcome. But then I started thinking, well, I don't need to modify, like, because some of them I was modifying so much and putting them so far out of shape from their original context that I just thought, well, I may as well be doing this from scratch. And I think that's where my love of letter forms really started to come out. So, I mean, Goldstein's is probably the only one here that's not a typefacer that I designed from scratch, because I think that's Helvetica Bold, but I sort of rounded the
man, that Seacliff, I could use that. You could make a typeface. That's a beautiful one.
Yeah. Oh, look, I have got a backlog of logo types that I've earmarked for future fonts, and I think that's what I'm going to do when I retire one day. I'm just going to design fonts, because I can see that as something that you have plenty of time and you want a little side project, and so I think maybe I'll still keep creating fonts like now, but I think that's something that I can envisage myself doing. So 1 week I can be doing typefaces like that, and then I can be indulging in sort of crests and emblems and more detailed logos. I mean, these style of logos aren't really flexible for every client, but for the right client, they're definitely the right route to take. But I love doing. I think we touched base a bit on that last week. But I really love designing emblems and stuff like that, and I'd love to go really detailed in some very vintage emblems down the track as well. So I get a kick out of doing that style of logo.
That's a huge different style, just even on this one page.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a wide range, and I think just your use of color, the use of where you're using the details is, and also we talked a little bit about this last week, is that especially with the Earl of whatever that name is, that
Leicester, Earl of Leicester.
Leicester?
Yep.
Well,
that's it. Yeah, it spells like Leicester or something like that, but Earl of Leicester.
Well, but like that one is a hugely responsive logo, depending on where you're using it. Right? And so it's those things I think you've just picked up on automatically on your own, right?
Yeah. Well, I guess studying, specializing in corporate identity and surrounding yourself by brands, that you follow and stuff like that. You pick up things along the way, and when a client has, sends through their usage, you have to problem solve how, obviously that's not going to work on everything. So I had to break it apart and create simplified versions of it so it would work in certain environments. So, you adapt along the way and you problem solve along the way when you read a brief and you work out where the logo is going to appear.
Cool.
So I can be indulging in that style, and then of course you've got logo marks, and these are out of context with the logo type, but they're just shows just a variety of different logo marks that I've created. I mean, this is just a very small batch that I put together, but sorry.
Oh, well, we have a question. So Kent wants to know, from the ones that before were the ones that were more detailed and stuff, did you draw all of these, or did you start with found objects and take it from there?
Every single one of them's drawn from scratch. With the Earl of Leicester, so with that one, I researched who the Earl of Leicester was. I think there's been a few, but there was a specific one, and I located his, I think Sir Robert Dudley or something like that. I can't remember the name. The story is actually on my website if you want to read it. And it shows the whole process. But with that one, I found, that's my phone. I've just turned it off. How unprofessional. Oh, no.
It's okay.
Okay, so I'll decline that. Sorry about that, guys. So resume share. Okay, and I'll just put my phone on air mode. Sorry about that. This is my multitasking skill.
You're doing fine. You're doing great.
So, with the Earl of Leicester, I found a fireplace that had his coat of arms. So I modelled it off that. I just did sort of a contemporary version of something that was carved in marble or something like that. And it's on my website. So I invite you to take a look, and it will show you the process for that one. But for the one to the left of it, the NB monogram with the birds and the roses and all that, that was all hand drawn. It was probably more simplified, and then because often it's quicker for me, like I might draw something down and it will give me the bones of what I want to do, and then I'll bring it into the vectoring stage, and I might push it further in the vectoring stage. So sometimes my vectoring can be exactly what I've done on paper, or sometimes it can be a lot more, and I've just pushed myself at the digitalizing stage to recreate extra leaves, or just make things look, push things into shape a little bit more. Same with the Dental Academy. Like I would have illustrated that first, but it would have been just a very crude sort of rough thumbnail, and I just pushed everything into shape. With emblems, it's important to note there's so much. You've got to really focus on the execution. That didn't come to life until right towards the end of me pushing the execution of that. I find with emblems and crests, they can look like clip art until you sort of hit that execution stage where everything starts to fall into place. So, that's the story behind those ones.
All right, you can keep going then. But these are so different, right? And this, again, is talking about your flexibility. And that's why I called this flexible and versatile, or versatile and flexible. I can't remember.
Yeah.
Because there is this arrange, and you're able to really meet the needs of different kinds of clients, right? And they're conceptual too, it's not like it's just your, anyway.
Yeah, definitely. So a lot of these ones, I mean, until you see the presentation, I mean, there's a lot of rationale that has gone in behind each one, and I'd be here forever if I was to explain all of them. On my website, you can see a few of them and the thinking behind them. But yeah, I guess the challenge with these ones is infusing the values behind the client, usually a duality between, what the client does and their values, etc., and trying to do it at a small scale so it can reduce and look iconic, etc., which, you have to get rid of a lot of detail to do. And they're kind of like brain teasers. I use this analogy a lot. It's like those brain teaser puzzles that you get. Like, it can be quite challenging working it out, but then all of a sudden you might have a light bulb moment and something just works and fits into shape, and then you know how to sort of, you've unraveled sort of, the problem, and you can sort of execute it from there. But
so even with these that are more graphic, are you also starting on paper? Because it seems like a lot of your lettering starts on paper. Are these also starting on paper and then you're scanning in?
Yes, they are. 100%. Look, I went through a stage where, and this is why I love lettering now, is because it sort of reintroduced me to going back to paper first. With these were all done with paper, because these are done all sort of within the last few years. And I used to make this mistake of jumping on the computer too early. And when you do that, everything starts to become contrived, because you start forcing issues. Even with some of them, like some of them on paper originally might have looked a bit different, right? And I pushed them on the computer, like I was saying with those other ones. But more often than not, I've got an idea down on paper first. And once I see that, I can get a bit jumpy and go, oh, I've got to get to the computer now and I've got to start executing it, rather than doing a refined sketch of it. Because, look, let's face it, to do a refined sketch of a circle, if you're an illustrator, it takes you, a fraction of the time to start, pushing those sort of elements together, as long as you've got the idea of what you want to do on paper first.
Right.
So I can be doing that one week, but everything changed when I did this, when this client landed on my desk. Now, a lot of people may have heard this story before, so but I'll tell it quickly again. This is a client that sort of changed the trajectory of what I specialize in. I mean, I still specialize in corporate identity, but I'm also known for lettering and calligraphy now, and it is because of this one client. So they landed on my desk. They're a Canadian client, and they're in the apparel industry. And when I read the brief, and this isn't the logo that they ended up going for, but I published it online anyway. But I identified with this client that they needed some sort of brush pen, sort of aesthetic style, signature style logo. And So I was following certain designers, like I mentioned last week, and I dabbled in a bit of, well, I created custom-made typefaces in the past, but this was the one where I wanted to sort of go out of my comfort zone and really indulge in trying to get that brush pen aesthetic. And so this is the sketch. This was my very first sketch of trying to capture that look. And you can see it. So the one down the bottom, that was the first one. And then I thought, okay, all right, so now let's just make it a little bit bigger. And, it's quite, it's it's not that pretty. But then I took it from this stage and I put it into the vectoring. And because I had better vectoring skills, I guess, than drawing type at that stage, I thought I could push it further. And that's how I got that result. And then this was the very next client that landed on my desk. And I think they had seen the David Michael and they said, well, we like that. We want a hand-drawn logo. And if you have a look at the sketch on the right, that's it. That's how it all started. Just, a very, very crude.
The only thing that changed was the why. There were lots of little changes, but really you kind of kept a lot of the feel. So were you using like a chisel tip, or were you just drawing that?
That's a pencil. That's just that. At that stage, I can tell you what my equipment was. Apart from my computer, all I owned was whatever A4 paper I could get from the photocopying machine, and a 2H lead pencil, and that's it. And that's all I had for. Okay, so I created this logo, and that's the equipment that I had for a year going forward from this.
Wow.
So in the early stages, all I ever did was sketch my what looks like brush pen. Like if you just look at the logo, it looks like it's created with a brush pen, and I can get those results organically now. But at the start, all I ever did was sketch my letter forms. So fast forward 3 to 4 years down the track, this is what my sketches look like now, and this is sort of me, really indulging in trying to get the results as refined on paper as I can. So now, fast forward 3 to 4 years, I've got every single pen under the sun, and brush pens, and I've taught myself how to get the results organically with the brush pen rather than lettering my letter forms, etc. And I balance between the two, and I'll talk about that in a sec. But we've smashed Black Ops, so you've probably overseen the Black Ops logo. But this,
no. Love it.
Thanks. I'm not either. So this is Blue Water, and the reason why I show this picture is because along the way, when I decided to, buy heaps of brush pens and all of that, what I found was every brush pen was completely different. Mm-hmm. And in the early stages, I knew how to sort of do one style, and I was using really hard tip brush pens, because hard tip brush pens steady the hand, and they're much easier to learn from. Because they offer that resistance on the paper. So then when I pick up a pen like this, which has got soft bristles, I was thinking, why isn't this working for me? Because I couldn't apply the same style, the technique to that pen as what I did for the hard tip brush pen. So each brush pen, it unlocks kind of different styles within. So you just have to decode it. You have to work it out. You have to, like I've heard you use as an analogy, you have to date it for a while. Right. And until you get to really know the pen. And so that pen worked really well for this style. And we touched base on it, I think, last week, where for this one, I wanted to use Blue Water to create it because the name was Blue Water. And unfortunately, again, this is another unused concept. So was this one. This is my most famous unused concept, but that's another story. Yeah.
It looks great.
Well, it answered the brief, but it answered the brief that I was given by the person that gave me the brief, not by the client. And just to give you a quick little story behind this one, Mandy, when she received this, as much as it answered the brief that I was given, she turned around and she said, I don't like my name. I don't want it standing out so much. So had I have known that was the case, I wouldn't have gone down this path for this client. So, anyway, moving on. So Jack Whitehall, he's a comedian / actor in the UK. He's quite well known over there. I don't know if he's popular in America, but in the UK he's very popular. And I did the
He
Singer
may be,
style.
but I don't even have cable, so he
Yeah.
probably is, and I just hadn't heard of him.
Yeah. So this is calligraphy, and not to be confused with lettering. So this is me getting the results, with the brush pen, the thick downs and the thin ups. And so with a logo like this, I can write it so many times. And I do this, and the reason why it looks so nice on paper here, and it looks quite, it looks just very close to what it is in the vectored version, because what I'll do is I'll do this technique where I trace and repeat. So once I don't use rules, I don't rule any guides to get straight baselines at the start. But what I'll do is I'll write the name, and then I'll get some tracing paper, and then not tracing paper, I'll use that Canson paper, which has transparency.
Bleed proof.
Yeah, that's it. And then I'll go over it again, and then I might do a rule line just to make sure that, I can line it up. And I'll keep repeating that until I kind of get that perfect, perfect version. So that's my process with that. And going back to that David Michael, this is what really opened up all these other logos, because still to this day I get inquiries based off that one logo. And because I fell in love with doing that style, it just became, I guess, a bit of a passion. This goes back to, I guess, lettering, where I'm sketching my letter forms or designing a typeface in this instance. So that just showcases a completely different style. And the reason why I do this, I just find it easier to infuse a company's personality into a typeface rather than scrolling through so many different fonts to try and find it.
Yeah.
And it's more enjoyable as well, And when you design it and you can show a client, this is why I've designed this typeface this way. They get behind it and they understand it more. And then they might be reluctant to say, oh, can you show me a different font? So when you've got that rationale that backs up everything, and in some of my presentations, I show the geometry behind the way I'll position, say, a logo, the mark towards the type and etc. Just the methodology behind it. And when clients see that, they don't, they're reluctant to say, oh, can we just make that smaller? Or, because I've already made these decisions, and there's a reason why these things, I sort of back my abilities to sort of find that right balance.
Right.
And there's nothing worse when a client says, oh, I want the mark to be heaps bigger, and then it's off balance and all of that. So if you can show them why you've done it, then it makes sense to them. I guess
how much in the presentation, when you're presenting this logo, how much are you taking them through the process of creation? It sounds like you might do a good bit of that so that they feel like they're part. They might not have been part of the process of those decisions, but now they understand them. Is that part of that presentation when you're pitching the final logos?
Yeah, it is. I don't put as much into it as what I used to. I probably overdid it in the early stages. I think you can over-present. I'm trying to simplify it a little bit more now. I think one or two pictures of the process is enough, just to show that this was created organically first with
right.
Some paper, and then I might show one or two pictures of just some rule lines, some grids, just so they know how everything shapes up. In the past, I would go to town doing these 3D renders of so it had a little bit of depth of field, and it looked really like, if you go back to some of my early Behance presentations, and they took heaps of time, and it was just to pad out the presentation, and I think it worked and it looked good, but perhaps it's a little bit overkill now. So I've tried to refine those presentations a little bit. So this is for Spotify. This is just Spotify is a client of mine, and I love working for them. They're a fantastic client, and I'm lucky enough to do titles for them, which I'll go into a little bit later. But this is something that they did, which was an internal thing. DC Cool, which was for Washington DC tourism. This was a really challenging project because I had to write the word cool, and everyone knows that cool comes in a few different ways. You've got sort of effortless cool. You've got that sort of grungy cool. There's so many different ways of cool, but cool is never forced. And so I came up with so many different varieties of the word cool for this. And it was just to showcase that Washington, D.C. tourism has this, it's not just known for, politics and the White House and all of that. There's the music industry, there's the great restaurants and all of that, the nightlife there, etc. So this was to promote that. And I felt very privileged that I was a guy from the Gold Coast that was designing this word cool for them over there. You know what? I can't wait to come over to America and go to these places and meet these clients and catch up and touch base, because I do feel this connection to the United States, having worked on so many clients for them, that when I'm doing my research and all of that, I feel this connection over there. And I've got a lot of friends over there, and I can't wait to come over and meet a lot of them.
We can't wait either.
Yeah. So we'll have to tee something up. I'll have to do a road trip. Maybe just go from east to west or vice versa. And just meet up with everyone. It'd be cool.
That'd be great.
So this was a client on the Gold Coast. What I'll do is would anyone be keen to sort of see my process on how I created this logo? It's just a short video. I don't know if you normally do videos on.
Yeah, let's see it. You might have to unplug your earbuds because I don't think we'll be able to hear it. So
okay, I'll do that now. So can you hear me now?
Yes.
Excellent. I'll turn it up just a little bit. Alrighty. So this is the process. So just before I press play, this gives you an example of what the sketch can look like in the very infant stages. And then moving forward, this next stage that you'll see the video go to, this is me indulging in the craft. Sometimes I go straight to the vectoring stage from this, but then sometimes I like to sort of indulge and, get I guess, intimate with the craft of drawing the letter forms and getting them as perfect as possible. So I'll hit play now. So feel free to ask any questions.
Is that real time, or are you speeding that up at all?
Just quickly to explain. So you can see for any left-handed letterers, calligraphers out there, you can see I'm over the top, and that means that basically the side of my palm sort of hovers over the top of the letter forms, which is what makes it easy for me to do what I do and not smudge. So yeah, that's when you're coming from underneath, that's where the problem really comes into play. You have to wait for the ink to dry or turn your page on a different angle.
So is this real speed or is it speeded up? Can you hear me?
Sorry, Diana, I think you asked a question. I couldn't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, hang on. I've got to turn my volume up. Sorry. Try again.
Sorry. Is this full, like normal speed, or is it speeded up at all or slowed down?
Well, this part's sped up a bit. I'll turn this down now so you can hear me. Fortunately, I have to turn the music up to hear you as well at the same time. So previously with the brush pen, that was pretty much normal speed. It may have been sped up a fraction just to fit it into an Instagram video, but not much. I do this style quite slow, so it is quite a slow, steady hand movement compared to some of the faster styles where you get texture through the brush strokes.
So then I have another question.
Sure.
So one thing I asked you off camera, I think last time, was about coffee, because you have a very steady hand. So I was like, oh, you must not drink any caffeine. And you said no, you do. So what's the trick with the steady hand? Is it just practice?
The trick is right before I'm doing something like this, try not to have a coffee. I love my coffee, but I've taught a few workshops where I've had a coffee right beforehand, and you couple that with the nerves of having a whole heap of eyes watching you try and execute some brush paint, because they're all there to see, you know, what you can bring to the table. I can get a bit jittery with it. But yeah, I think you just got to sort of slow down, take a deep breath, and it eventually comes. A coffee does, I guess, give you the jitters a little bit. So if you can sort of hold off having your coffee, or wait till those the caffeine's worn off, have a couple of big tall glasses of water before you start lettering, then that's going to help.
That's good.
So this is it in context with the rest of the presentation. Okay, so I'll move on.
Did you do all the video, or did you have somebody else edit?
No, I did all of that.
That's awesome.
So, thank you. So, okay, so that's my process with creating that. Sorry, it was tricky because to hear you, I had to turn the volume right up.
Do you want to put your earbuds back in? Because it was a little bit clear with your earbuds in. Sorry.
No, it's
just a little echoey.
So that shows that process. And here you can see from that one logo, when I went right back to the start with David Michael, it's just opened up a whole new world of logo design for me. You know, I can be, like I said, I can be working on, you know, dentists one week and then something like this the next that warrants a hand-lettered style logo. But had I have not I've stepped outside of my comfort zone to try and to do that David Michael logo the way I did it, I may never have sort of opened up all these other styles that you can sort of see here. I mean, they're all a little bit different. You'll probably see some sort of certain styles that are similar, but I'd like to think that there's a lot that, you know, you do have a variety there. And it
very much.
So, these are just a few over the last couple of years that I've worked on.
Even your R's, even like the letter, you're not even doing it the same every time. Like, especially there were a lot of lowercase R's in the last page. And that to me is, I mean, there's just the R in breeze, the R in process, the R in soirees, the R in treasure, the R in flutter. They're all different. I mean, even the one, right. I mean, and I guess that is like, but this is really difficult for a lot of people to do, like the chameleon kind of feel, but I think it's definitely one of your superpowers for sure. Yeah.
Look, the R is one of those letters that you can approach it so many different ways. I mean, and if you have a look here, there's a couple more R's that that are different, like in retro there, that's a different one. And R strata, which is the bottom right-hand one.
Mm-hmm.
That's a crazy ligature through there, which kind of is a bit tricky, but look, that's the beauty about letter forms. You know, it's like a language within a language. You know, you can apply a different technique or a different approach to a letter, and it comes across as it has its own personality. It's like whatever approach you apply creates its personality, and that's why I find it easier and more enjoyable to infuse that personality through designing letters and logo types from the ground up, rather than just choosing a font. Do you know what I mean? Because
absolutely,
it helps you. But I mean, obviously, not for every client you can infuse this sort of style of logo. But you know.
Do you draw letters every day? Do you do calligraphy every day?
No, I do it a lot more often now. Since I've been doing titles for Spotify, I write, you know, most days. But before Spotify, if I wasn't working on a hand-lettered client, I mean, there was a period when I was trying to get better and better at this. And, you know, yes, I definitely was. And I think the learning curve's quite steep. I think you can get to a level where you start to really like what's happening. And then, you know, you can maybe back off a little bit, but then to get to that next level, you've got to start to apply yourself again. But
sorry, they're moving something in the room next door and using the, I don't know what you call it, the pressure washer to clean out screens. Sorry.
No problems. That's
loud
okay.
Sounds are crazy.
Yeah. This shows now another style within, you know, the lettering world and calligraphy sort of styles. This is just that more authentic sort of, I guess, not refined, polished vector work, a little bit more vintage sort of style, I guess you could call it. With all of these logos, I used a ruling pen, and I used it not in the sense that you would normally use one. I might sketch it with a pencil first, and then I'll trace over and dip the ruling pen in ink. And I love the way that the ink spreads out across, the extremities of what you're doing, and it gives it that little bump and texture. And then I'll scan it, and then I'll sort of do an auto trace and tidy up a few of the points, but I won't say do a clean vectored version and then use a filter in Illustrator to get that bump. I like to sort of honor the integrity of what I laid down on paper first.
Right. That's awesome.
So corporate identity. Look, we went through this last week with corporate identity with logo suites, that it's important to have different sort of lockups to fit different environments, small, large banners, shop fronts, etc. Often a shop front will have, a very banner. So it's got to be able to work, very sort of long with not much height. Colors are important. Patterns, as simple and as easy as that pattern is to produce, it's such a great asset. So, and the typefaces that you use, and I explained last week as well that this is my font Dissimo that I created, from the ground up, which, I didn't do it for this client, but it was me using it for the first time for this client. And just so then you can see how it all comes together, because you're only doing half a job if you design just a logo for a client. Because guaranteed, if you are a logo designer and you don't do all these other things, then if your client is then just has the logo to work with, then their identity is going to fall flat on its face, because they need design decisions made for them using the logo in context with how they're presenting it, whether it be advertising, online, packaging, etc. So here you can see how it all comes together. And it's because I made these design decisions right from the start. And that's why. So if I had have just given Black Hops a logo just on its own, and they had have, because they like to do things in-house a lot. If they had have done it themselves, they wouldn't have had that pattern. They wouldn't have potentially had the colors and the devices and the icons, to sort of execute it to that next level. So it's important, if you're a logo designer, not to call yourself a logo designer, but an identity designer.
I love that.
So yeah, here you can see, and that's how it works in one of their posters, etc. So you can see it's drawing on all those assets for it to come together, and it still has the same feeling as the can, as the logo. It's all consistent. This brings me to murals, and again, this all stems from doing this one logo for David Michael, and that branched off into me wanting to go large scale, and I've only done a few of them, and I want to do more, and I want to get a little bit more experimental with them, and I will when the opportunities pop up. But this is me, and I was on Snapchat for a while, and this was I did a story on this, and one day I saved the story, and one day I might publish it on YouTube or something like that, but it shows the process in which I came about to creating this, because again, with this style, it's from my first attempt to the last attempt, even though you can kind of see where it came from, there were many like iterations that went along the way to get this lock up tight. And it probably wasn't until I then brought it into the computer and then really manually sort of worked out the hierarchy and the scaling of certain letters, that it started to really come together. So the digitalization stage is, for me, I think, just as important as getting things down on paper.
Did you do this, project it and then paint it on, or use markers, or okay?
Correct. I mean, to be honest, the hard work is on the paper. Putting it on the wall is easy when you do it like this. I mean, if you're using a projector, I mean, I'm sure if you're doing it the old school way, then definitely there's a craft in that, and there's a massive amount of time required to get that right. when you're using a projector, it's super easy. And if anyone ever wanted to get into murals and they're intimidated by it, don't be. If you can get it looking great on paper or on the computer first, all you got to do is project it, make sure that projector doesn't move a millimeter. Like if it moves a millimeter, you're in trouble. You've got to try and line it up, and that can be problematic.
Do you project it reversed like this?
I project it. I do it both ways to see what's going to look easier for me to trace. And you only need a very faint, outline on the wall to do it. With this was in a shopping complex, and they couldn't turn all the lights off. So I think I did this one with the reversed version, and I quickly pencil it. I think you've got to pencil it first, even though you could go straight to pens. But if that projector moves, because the inking stage takes a lot longer.
Right.
If that projector moves, then you're in trouble, because you know, lining it up can be a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah.
So I'll quickly go over it with the pencil first, and then I'll then step back, and then often you can't see your pencil lines that well, but you just got to trust it when you get up close, and then you just start inking it.
That's awesome.
These are just a couple of other ones. So, I mean, this actually shows 3 stages. The top one is what it looked like, just sketched out, not sketched out, just using the brush pen. And I probably didn't need to vectorize this one. This for me, I think I had time to kill, and I wanted to vectorize it, but I could have just gone straight from the one up the top. I think I just wanted to make it as perfect as possible. And when you vectorize something, that enables you to shift and make those micro adjustments that otherwise, when you're doing a faster style like that, you can write it so many times, and you know, you might not get it exactly right. So you can see here, okay, so if you look at the top left one, structure gets a little bit tight and condensed. So I just sort of spaced it out a little bit.
Also, the terminal of that C on rhythmic really changed a lot when you vector. And I think maybe sometimes you're making decisions because you know it's going to be painted, and you're not going to get that same sort of flow.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You kind of need to know what it's going to look like. Solid.
Yeah. This was really hard. It was on, like, the texture of that wall was really rough, and I was using a paintbrush, and that's why it's not super clean. But it was my first time with a brush pen and not a Posca pen. And this is another one. This was an identity job. There's my gorgeous little girl.
I know, she is so cute.
My little cheeky monkey. That was a fun project. And, you know, I wanted that hand-drawn look for this client as well. And it just fit in with that cafe vibes. It's right on the beach, free-flowing, easygoing lifestyle. That was a fun project. And then, of course, again, I keep going back to David Michael, but David Michael also then opened up the opportunity to do typography art, stuff that's not so much corporate-based. Sorry, not corporate-based, but corporate identity-based, stuff that gets used for advertising campaigns. This was for a digital agency in the US. They wanted to do some wall art and stuff like that. And so I think this was for their website. So, also this was for a advertising campaign. So, you know, it opens the doors to be able to, I'd like to do a little bit more of this side of typography work, where it is for advertising agencies and campaigns, because as much as I do love the corporate identity side of things, I mean, so much goes into the presentations and all of that. Sometimes it's nice to, to just solely work on the typographical side of things.
Austin said her shirt kind of matches the bricks on the wall, and then he smiled and he said, "I know that M well," and then he made a big smiley face.
Yes, he does. He added some animation to that M, which was fantastic. You're a legend, Austin. Thank you very much for that.
He is. And these are beautiful. So did you do is one of these for Type Fight?
Both of them are. They were. And Type Fight, I mean, I just love it because, again, going back to David Michael, he introduced me to the wonderful world of, people that are obsessed with this. You know, we reference ourselves as type nerds, and we really are. And it's an endearing term. I mean, think about it. Like, there was a website created that was designed around pitting them in a fight ring to design the best letter. I mean, how type nerdy is that? It's awesome. And so that was fun. And the one on the right was my Infinity Y, which I, really enjoyed creating. And I wasn't going to indulge in my brush penny sort of style. I wanted to do something a little conceptual there. And so I had a lot of fun with that one.
Is that 3D rendered?
No, I did it all in photo. Well, actually, I did it all in Illustrator first. And the only part that's Photoshop is slapping on the textures.
Man, that looks incredible. It looks like it's made out of wood or metal or something. Like, it looks incredible.
I probably went a little crazy with the textures there. It's very easy to sort of, when you're adding texture to something, to sort of push it too far, or, to get that aesthetic right. There's a real balancing act. But I was really happy with the way that one turned out. And the one on the left was the last type fight. I was against my good friend Colin Tierney, who, we chose the letter B, and that was a lot of fun. And both results were just epic. And so I had a lot of fun with that one. So music industry. So I mentioned, I think last week, I did something for Troye Sivan, where I've done quite a few album titles now, which I really enjoy doing. And usually it follows on with the track list on the end, on the back. And I enjoy that. It's a lot of fun. So Troye Sivan is an artist. And so, did we talk about him last week?
We did, just a little bit.
Just a little bit. So, look, it was amazing when I first took on this job. It was amazing. It was amazing how popular he is. Like, I didn't know it at the time. And then my brother called up and said, "Mate, I just saw that work that you did for Troye Sivan at Times Square. It was on the news." I'm like, "Oh, what?" And then I started seeing this. Good on him. He's quite a success story, and I really enjoyed working with him and doing this project. And to see my album on, the Ellen Show and the Jimmy Fallon Show was quite a,
That's awesome.
Yeah, no, it really was. So this gives you a little insight to the process for creating that. And there are a number of styles that I did before we actually knuckled down on this style. And this style is something that I've done a lot of since, and I feel like I've improved a lot in this style. So, but I wrote that so many times. In the end, neighborhood has a lot of letters in it, right? There's a lot of letters there. And to get that perfect in one go is difficult, especially with this style. That's really, it's quite fast, this style, when writing it. Because they wanted that texture to come through. And the only way to get that texture is to move the brush pen quickly over the page. So, you're going to get mistakes on some letters. You're going to get perfect letters on some attempts. And so with the end result, I did a composition. I scanned them all in, and then I sort of photoshopped the best letters. I mean, it was probably from about 2 or 3 attempts where I got it. But, there might have been a B that looked better on one of, the others. And, we had to work on that B quite a bit, because B is one of my favorite letters, and if not my favorite letter. And you can get quite adventurous with a B. So that was the end result for that one. But you can see that. I mean, that 9 pictures there, that's only 9 of about, I don't know, 30 odd that I probably did to get it. Like, seriously, it's So
let me ask you a question about a B real quick.
Sure.
So, where do you start with this? Do you start it on that loop, or do you make that the main stroke first?
The very first stroke is that top loop.
Okay. And
then the bottom loop, and then that stem. But for that style particular, I've done that style quite a few number of times. But I think if you have a look at the little thumbnail that's the top row in the center column, you can see I went quite big and adventurous with that top loop. So we had to peg it back a bit. But so that's just one way of doing it. Because the reason why I do the stem last, that stem really changes the aesthetic of the B. So if you get that curve, that beautiful curve, and transition through the upstroke and the downstroke of that curve, you can visualize where that stem should sit. Whereas if you do the stem first and then shoot out that fast B, you've got less control over you know, of the fast stroke rather than the stem. It's just easier for me to do it that way with that style.
That's good. I'm doing a shoot boogers and I am stuck on the bee. So I'm going to practice some bees for the.
Excellent. So yeah, with I mentioned Spotify before. Love them. Fantastic client. So they've got these documentaries that they do for Rap Caviar. And so I get all the pens and papers out. And this is what I really love about this job every week is it's just me writing. There's no presentations involved in doing this work. It's me just putting my headphones on, pushing the computer to the side. Well, I can't do that. It's too big to do that, but you know what I mean? I occupy part of my desk and I just listen to music and I just start writing and I do title work. So this is just a few screenshots of just some of the
and then is it vectorized also, or is it just
none of this is vectorized?
Oh, wow.
All of this is just 100% calligraphy.
Wow, that's awesome.
And you can see some big names there that that I get to write. I write some pretty interesting things for them. It's really fun. And this is just a variety of the different styles that we go between. I mean, sometimes we introduce new styles, but I'd never even attempted black letter sort of calligraphy before. And well, that's a lie. I had tried it a couple of times, but I'd never really, followed it through. Like I'd attempted a few letters in some workshops that I used to do with another type guy in Australia, Wayne Thompson, I used to help him out with some of his workshops, and he had a segment dedicated to black letter, and that's where I always came unstuck. But so for this, for Spotify, yeah, these are just a variety of different styles.
I love that G in Grizzly.
Oh, geez, man. Okay, G and Grizzly.
It's under brick by brick.
Yeah. So exactly. G is a tricky letter to write sometimes. There's a lot of different ways, and you can see it in Gucci Mane on the top right over there underneath Kanye. That's just another way. But and yeah, so look, it's a lot of fun. It's just me writing, and that's what I love. That's my dog going off.
It's okay.
And also for Spotify, they've got a rock this section, so dedicated to their rock music. So this is what I love about them. They're really going to this effort of really making an experience, and I don't think a lot of people appreciate the behind the scenes work that goes into it. And I'd love to do a little video that sort of illustrates it, and maybe down the track we will. But this is a font that I created for Spotify that's used, overlaid over their rock albums. Sorry, not rock albums. They're the segments that they do for their rock industry, the rock documentaries that they do. And, we probably could have chosen fonts, but for me, I wanted to create something, like for this one, the brief was they wanted to do something that had that sort of fashion label but was quite rock as well. And so if I isolate that R, hang on, Huey, you can't hear me. He'll stop in a second. It's probably the postman. Anyway, that rock, the way the leg comes out, it almost has that guitarist sort of.
It does.
Out, strumming a guitar, and I followed that sort of motive through to the K's and a few other things, and that was so much fun to create. And so that's the work that goes into doing these things, and I love it. It's super fun. This is a really cool little side project I started working on with a friend from work. I work with this really talented musician in the office. So I work in an office that's a web development company, and I love the guys there. I feel so lucky to be a part of their family. I occupy a little desk space there, and in that office, there's this talented musician, and he produces music, on the side and stuff like that. And one day I came into the office and I said, "Look, mate, I wrote this word breathe, and I want to publish it online. And there's a real problem with using music on YouTube or anywhere unless you've got licensing. You shouldn't be using it." And I don't like to, sort of break those rules. I'm a bit of a, I don't know. I go on the cautious side of those sort of things because, and I don't think you can these days. It picks it up with the,
It does,
software,
right?
Yeah, the software they use. So I said, "Mate, would you write something for this?" And he saw it as an opportunity to just do something creative. And I said, And I hate it when people say this to me, but I said it to him. I said, I don't want you to spend too much time on it. And then so we brainstormed this idea. Why don't we do a little series where we're only allowed to do spend an hour or two max? You know, I'll write a word and then he has to come up with the music. He writes some music revolving around a word, and then I've got to do the writing towards it. So we've only done 2 at the moment, and we're going to come back to it and finish it off. We want to do at least 5 and then do a Behance documentary on the process of how we did it. What's really, really cool about this, and sorry to be stuck on this one screen for so long for all you viewers out there. It's going to get really cool in a second. What's really cool about this is when I wrote the word breathe, he looked at that and he came to the conclusion that he was, instead of using instruments, he was just going to use his voice and nothing but his voice, very Bobby McFerrin style. You know, don't worry, be happy thing. It was all his voice. So he did the same thing with this. And look, we'll go straight into it. I'm going to take my headphones out. I'm going to crank the volume and I won't talk over the top of it, and we'll come back to it afterwards. You gotta breathe.
That's so awesome.
Yeah, that writing backwards is really hard to do too. So
no, you are a master at it.
Yeah, no, that was a lot of fun, that project. And we did one more. If we've got time, I'll show you one more. This was the next word that we did, and this time he came up with the music first, and we chose the word speak. And this is just him and his voice and his daughter's voice, and he just cleverly, edits it and tweaks it, engineers it. I don't know how he does it, but this was the next one that I did. So I edited this together. This was harder. It's not as refined because I had to kind of match the tempo of what he was doing and just use my basic knowledge of editing within iMovie. So I'll take the headphones out again and we'll play.
Speak, 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 speak.
Man, that's awesome. I didn't realize how much I said awesome until you mentioned that about, I think, did you say that or was it somebody else? How much?
I don't.
Anyway.
Yeah, I drop the word awesome all the time as well.
I love that. And that it shows the range, and that it was his voice range and his daughter's. I thought that was really great.
Oh yeah, it's super cool. I mean, I think I touched base on it last week, but I don't know. I love music, and I don't know. I'm trying to learn instruments at the moment. I've been teaching myself the guitar for the last few years, and we've been jamming every Thursday night. And whenever we have a little break, I jump on the drum kit, and I think I want to be a drummer now. I think I like drumming more. No, it's music. So I really appreciate what he did for that, and the talent that musicians have, and I think that's another reason why I really enjoy the Spotify work and writing music albums. It's sort of I enjoy that industry, so it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. Scratches that itch, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. So we touched base on this earlier in last week, but I think, like I said, I like to have little side projects going on. And early in the year, I started drawing waves. And
this year?
Yeah, it was this year. It feels like
Wow.
a couple of years ago, but it was only at the start of this year. And I did it through, I think it was December and January, and then I stopped. But I'm going to come back to it. It's just on ice at the moment, and because I really love drawing. And that's what I used to be able to do at school. That was my kind of thing at school, was drawing. And if we can go back to David Michael really introduced me to drawing again. Granted, it was for letter forms, but it got me back using the tools on paper, more often, and I love it. So, at some point I want to do paintings. I want to, go large scale with paintings and see what I can do there. But, I guess at the moment I'm bogged down by work and that sort of commitment. So, but, down the track, it'll definitely happen.
That's awesome. I love these. It's an incredible, the detail. I think you get some of that itch from some of those emblems that you were doing. You kind of get that same sort of detail in this and in the wave drawings. Anyway, I just think you're terrific, and I'm so glad that you got to go through the more of your work and kind of telling that story.
Yeah.
So it really does help. And I think, we talked about this just a little bit last week, was just how you really got some of these jobs was just posting and just being consistent.
Yeah.
And you took time to make your photos kind of, have good lighting and do those things. I think that really made a difference, but it was that you were consistent and still are consistent, even if you take little windows of time, right? Yeah.
So basically, when I had no business at all, right at that GFC point, when my client work dried right up, I was looking online, and I was, it was around that time I was involved in Logo Pine, and you looked at what logos were being gallerized and all of that, and I hadn't published anything at that point in time, and you just have to identify execution and what makes something look really nice, right? And then you have to interpret it and then try and bring that out in your own work. And then just over the years, going on from that point when I really wanted to intently focus in designing logos and identities and stuff like that, I would just question everything I did until I got it to a point, until I thought, would that get gallerized, or would that get, is that on par with what I find aesthetic that other people are doing? I won't show this to the client until I've reached a point where, when a design pops, right? You do. I mean, I know this sounds self-indulgent, but you look at it, you go, yeah, that looks sexy. That looks hot.
Right. Right.
So I wouldn't show a client until I had that, I felt that I had achieved that. Right. Or, if I won't put it on my website, I'm not going to send it to the client, and so you set that bar, and it can be a dangerous place because you've got to, but it's a good thing, right? But Yeah, so that's just what I kept doing. I wouldn't show a client anything that I wasn't really proud of, and that I wouldn't publish online, and from there publishing it online would just result in, you know, people either liking it or reposting it. You know, there's so many like bloggers out there, and, you know, design inspiration sites that might curate a whole heap of logos, and they might write about them, and that started happening. And the same thing with lettering, you know, because it was my logos before it was lettering. You know, I started getting a following just from you know, before lettering, just from logo marks and stuff like that. And then lettering came along and it started becoming that as well. And more so, I guess. But yeah, that's how clients start to see, oh, I saw this on that, and I just, you know, I want that. You know, I want something like that. I really like what you did there. And sometimes that's really cool. A lot of the times it's really cool, because if they're referencing something that you've done before, it can really sort of steer a ship. You know, it can start to give you a vision. Okay, well, they like this. Obviously, it's got to be different, but I at least know what the client likes. So
Right. And it was something that you created, so then it gives you a little bit more leeway on how far out you need to go, or whatever. I want to, because we're like so over, you've got to get to work. I know. I so appreciate that you are able to give us so much time, for real.
Yeah.
And I know another thing. So I would say you are an extrovert. I think we're all a little bit of both, but you seem to really get energized by talking, and you want to meet with your clients. And, you know, it's not like you just want to do this email exchange and you'll get it to get, you know?
Yeah.
And so, but you're working alone. You do work in an office space with other people, but they're not part of your business. So having the relationships with the clients and then other designers, I think has been critical to your success. So what kind of things have you done to connect with other designers? Is it just reaching out and commenting on Dribbble or Behance, or what are you doing?
I haven't really reached out a lot. A designer, John Stapp, reached out to me once and then put me in contact with Colin Tierney, who I may have mentioned this last week. Correct me if I didn't, if I did. But we bounce between each other. Like I'll send him visuals of what I do. I love getting his eyes on what I'm doing. Like, you know, one, to say, hey, this is what I'm working on and all of that, but then also get his feedback. I find we've got very similar sort of, you know, what he can add to my designs, you know, helps, and hopefully vice versa and stuff like that. So we, I like taking his feedback on board. And then I'm part of a Slack group. So he then introduced me to a whole heap of guys who I mentioned. You've probably interviewed half of them. I won't go through all their names because I'll forget someone and they'll be, oh, what? Yeah, forgot me.
Right. It'll be like the client you haven't reached out to.
Yeah, exactly. You watch me after this, I'm going to be hitting all my clients up. No. So yeah, just through that.
So you know, how often are you connecting? So with Colin, is it like 3 times a week? Is it more than that? Is the Slack group, how much are you using that?
The Slack group's pretty much daily, although sometimes lately I've been pretty slack on Slack. Just because I've been busy, but sometimes it's daily, and then sometimes I might not touch base for a week or two, but then they have these weekly sort of hangouts where we all jump on like a Skype thing, and we all just have a chat, touch base where we are and stuff, and that's really cool. It's often. I mean, I've got Slack open all the time, and so I'll check in. I might not, always be active on it, but I'll sort of, see what's going on.
But it's not like something that you're doing once every 3 months. It's something that is in part of your process. It's part of your routine, because I think that it does help you to stay connected. It also helps you to get real feedback, I think.
Yeah.
Right?
This is a relatively new thing for me, though. I've probably been on that Slack channel for I think about a year now. So, for a long time I was completely isolated from everything, and it was just me doing my thing and working things out myself and not having that engagement with other designers. So, it's nice to be able to have that and fall back on that. Like if, I've got a quoting question or something like that, or, it's just, you bounce ideas around and, it's pretty cool. And
Well,
also meeting you recently, like we've had a couple of chats now, and we just end up, I always walk away from it going, geez, I'm really glad I spoke to Diane then. I kind of needed to get all that off my chest because, when you're dealing with clients through the year and stuff like that, there are things that pop up that, you've got to problem solve and stuff like that. And it's nice to know other people going through the same problems.
exactly.
And how they deal with it. And, you feed off each other when you can communicate.
Well, I also feel like sometimes it's just helping somebody else solve a problem. So if I feel like if I have a problem, because I think sometimes people are like, well, I don't want to bother you with what's going on. But really, if I shared something, it's kind of fun to you get out of your space and you're able to help somebody, help me solve my issue. Well, why don't you try this or and I just think that us working together, even if we're on total other parts of the world, hemispheres for sure. I just think it's nice. And this is the beauty of the internet. And this is why I created Design Recharge, because I was alone and I wanted to be able to connect with other people. And
definitely.
I just think it's really cool that we're able to do that. And I think, a lot of people use the internet maybe in not the best ways. And I think it's really good. This is a good way to use this 100%, platform.
100%. Like, look, I often say, look, with social media, sure, there are a lot of negatives, but there are also real positives as well, and you can't ignore like how good those positives can be, like just staying in touch with people. Like, when I lived in London, I'm in touch with these people that otherwise I would have forgotten about, just, when, you meet people for a certain period of time, then you haven't seen them, just life's fast paced and all of that. But with, something like Facebook, you're in touch,
right. Right.
And people say, well, why don't you just pick up the phone? But you don't. You probably wouldn't with a lot of them. Some you would and stuff like that. But, it's good like that. And social media obviously has enabled me to hit a bigger clientele fetch, etc. And, so they're the positives. And I enjoy that. The negatives is this constantly seeing people. And I hate that. Says the guy that woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning.
That was liking a post I made. Yes, but I'm right there with you. So, well, we could just keep going on, and me and you we'll need to schedule another one. But I don't want to keep you forever, and it's like 7 o'clock at night, so my husband's probably starving. So I need to go get something and take it home. But
no worries.
I can't thank you enough, Matt. And I just want to make sure I'm going to share all of the links again. I know I did this last week, and these will be under the show notes again.
Yeah.
But you can find his work at verg.com.au. That's verg.com.au. And then on Instagram, Matt Vergotis, MattVergotis. And then Facebook, what Facebook? I don't know what I said. Matt Verg, Verg, and then Twitter is also Matt Vergotis. So check him out. I am going to put all these in the chat really quick and make sure that everybody can see them. And then they'll also be in the YouTube. Again, guys, hit subscribe if you're on YouTube. This is something you can come to and participate in. I really appreciate you guys staying on so long today. I think it's close to the end of the day, probably for you, Carol Ann. I'm not sure where you are, Carol. But
thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And thanks, everyone, for leaving a comment. I deliberately didn't look at the comments because I can't multitask at the same time, but I'll go through them now. Sorry if I didn't answer anything.
Well, I appreciate it. Just so you guys know, I have this is a crazy week. It's a crazy week for Design Recharge. So I have Tom Ross on Thursday at 11:30 my time. So that's 12:30 Eastern and 9:30 a.m. in Pacific time. So, and in the UK, it's at 5:30 p.m. So it's in the middle of the night for you, Matt. But
right, Tom Ross, I've Skyped with him a couple of times actually. He's a great guy. So I'll try and tune in or watch the repeat for sure.
Yeah, he's just such a great guy, and he actually has used my new little services that I have. They're not little, just services. I need to not say little. Recruiting creatives. So he hired one of my, I placed somebody with him. So hopefully it's working out. So he has 90 days. And then if it's not, I can get him somebody else. But but anyway, Matt, thank you so much for giving us 2 weeks in a row. This was incredible. I can't wait to do another Skype with you. And just so you know, Kent said that he wanted to see if I could give you his email. He's also a professor. So he's like, oh, hopefully I can email with you later.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I'll connect you and him so that you guys can get connected.
Excellent.
But
awesome.
we will talk soon, and I will see the rest of you guys, and maybe Matt too, on Thursday. And then next week I'm off. So two for this week, none for next week. But I'll be back the week after. And if you want to sign up, you didn't know how to get in touch, or you just found this video, you can actually join us live at designrecharge.org or rechargingyou.com and just sign up, and then you'll get a link with all the questions the day before, and then you'll get a link 30 minutes before the show so you know how to join live. And that's it. And I'll see you guys next time.
Unreal. Thanks for the chat, Diane. Thank you everyone for tuning in.